Imagine waking up at 3 a.m. to the sound of sirens. Not police sirens, but the long, wailing drone of civil defense alarms that haven't been used since the Cold War. You reach for your phone to check the news, but there's no signal. The internet is dead. The television shows only static or generic emergency broadcast card instructing you to stay indoors. Then you hear a low rumble shaking the windows. You look outside, expecting a storm. Instead, you see the sky filled with paratroopers descending like rain. On the horizon, off the coast, massive transport ships are emerging from the fog. For over 2 centuries, the United States has fought its wars on foreign soil. The American people have lived with the assumption that it can't happen here. But what if that safety was an illusion? What if the impossible happened? What if a global coalition with superior technology and overwhelming numbers managed to breach the fortress? Welcome to the invasion of America. To understand how terrifying this scenario is, we first have to look at why it hasn't happened yet. In our reality, the United States is geographically the most defensible nation on Earth. To the east and west, it's protected by 2 massive oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, which act as giant moats. To the north and south, it has friendly neighbors. And inside the borders, a population of over 330 million people, heavily armed, spread across a landmass the size of a continent. Military strategists call the U.S. the Unconquerable Fortress. But in our what-if timeline, the world has changed. Imagine a scenario where the United States has isolated itself diplomatically. Its economy has weakened. Meanwhile, a new grand coalition of superpowers has formed in secret. They've developed technology that renders American satellites blind and its navy obsolete. The goal isn't just to win a battle. The goal is to seize the land, the resources, and the infrastructure of the North American continent. The plan is launched. The fortress is breached. Pause for a moment and try to visualize the scale of this. We aren't talking about a movie where a few paratroopers land in a high school football field. We are talking about a modern, industrial-scale military operation. Imagine the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the gateways to the American economy seized by foreign Marines. Imagine roadblocks on the interstate highway system. The I-95 corridor on the East Coast, usually jammed with commuters, is now jammed with armored convoys. The emotional shift would be shattering. For generations, Americans have seen themselves as the protectors of the world. Overnight, that psychology flips. The protector becomes the occupied. The feeling of absolute safety that defines American life vanishes, replaced by the primal fear of survival. How could this actually happen? In this timeline, the invasion doesn't start with boots on the ground. It starts in silence. Phase 1 is a massive cyber Pearl Harbor. In a coordinated strike, the Grand Coalition uses next-generation malware to shut down the U.S. power grid, disable the GPS network, and scramble military communications. Without GPS, precision missiles are useless. Without the power grid, the logistics of moving the U.S. Army halt. The country is paralyzed. While the U.S. is blind and deaf, Phase 2 begins, kinetic bombardment of key naval bases. Norfolk, San Diego, and Pearl Harbor are neutralized before the ships can even leave the docks. With the seas cleared and the skies contested, the transport ships arrive. They don't land everywhere, that's impossible. They target the economic hearts, the port of New York and New Jersey in the east and the California coast in the west. The beachheads are established. The invasion has begun. However, the invaders immediately run into the biggest problem with invading America. Geography. America is huge. It is 2,800 miles from coast to coast. Let's say the invaders successfully take New York City and Los Angeles. What now? They control the edges, but they don't control the country. To get from the East Coast to the resources in the Midwest, they have to cross the Appalachian Mountains. To get from the West Coast, they have to cross the Sierra Nevada and the Rockies. These mountains are natural fortresses. Bridges would be blown up by retreating U.S. forces. Tunnels would be collapsed. The interstate highway system, built originally for defense, becomes a trap. An invading convoy stretching for miles is a sitting duck for ambushes. The invaders would realize that conquering the U.S. is not like conquering a European country. It is a logistical hell. They might hold the cities, but they would lose the land. This leads us to the second major outcome, the resistance. There is a famous quote often attributed to a Japanese admiral in World War II. You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. In this timeline, that quote becomes reality. The U.S. civilian population owns an estimated 400 million firearms. That's more guns than people. As the official U.S. military regroups inland, perhaps moving the capital to Denver or Omaha, civilian population becomes the largest irregular army in history. We wouldn't see massive tank battles in the suburbs. We would see a brutal, grinding insurgency. Snipers in office buildings, IEDs on country roads. Drones modified by teenagers in basements to drop explosives on enemy camps. The invaders would face a dilemma. To control the population, they need millions of soldiers. But the more soldiers they send, the more targets they provide. The occupation would bleed the invaders dry, turning every small town into a battle of attrition. What happens to your daily life in the occupied zones? If you live in a major coastal city under foreign control, life becomes a dystopia of rationing and surveillance. The U.S. dollar collapses instantly. The global stock market crashes, wiping out savings and retirement accounts overnight. The invaders would likely issue a new occupation currency. To buy food, you'd need a specialized ID card. Fuel would be rationed strictly for military vehicles. The internet as we know, it would be replaced by a heavily censored intranet controlled by the occupying force. But there's a stranger economic consequence, the scorched earth. As U.S. forces retreat, they would likely sabotage their own infrastructure to prevent the enemy from using it. Oil refineries in Texas might be set ablaze. Silicon Valley data centers might be wiped. The invaders came for America's wealth, but they might find themselves ruling over a smoking ruin. While the eyes of the world are fixed on the war in North America, what happens to the rest of the planet? With the U.S. military fighting for its life at home, the global order collapses. The U.S. Navy is no longer patrolling the trade routes. Piracy returns to the high seas. Regional conflicts in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Asia explode without the threat of American intervention. The invasion of America wouldn't just end the United States. It would end the era of globalization. Every nation would scramble to arm itself, knowing that no one is coming to save them. The most profound change, however, isn't strategic, it's psychological. For the first time in history, Americans would be refugees. Picture the highways leading out of the cities, clogged with families trying to escape the conflict zones. Camps set up in national parks. The distinct American optimism, the belief that tomorrow will be better than today, would be crushed. Ask yourself, if you heard tanks rolling down your street, what would you do? Would you collaborate with the occupiers to keep your family safe and fed? Would you try to flee to the neutral zones in the mountains? Or would you join the resistance, risking everything for a country that might already be gone? It's a question none of us want to answer, but in this timeline, it's the only question that matters. This scenario sounds like fiction, but history tells us that no empire lasts forever. Rome fell. Byzantium fell. I want to hear your strategy in the comments. If the invasion started tomorrow, which state do you think would be the safest place to hide? Would it be the mountains of Montana, the swamps of Louisiana, or the forests of Appalachia? Let me know where you're heading in the comments below. I'll be reading the best survival strategies. The invasion of America remains one of the most difficult military feats to imagine, simply because the geography and the population make it a nightmare for any aggressor. But as we've seen, if the stars aligned and technology shifted, even the fortress could fall. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the ultimate what if, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We explore a new alternate timeline every week. Next time, we're re-asking a question about the very foundation of the country. What if the South had won the Civil War? The map would look very different. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode.